I'm Nick Roush, and this is another new edition of 11 Personnel. No Huddle, presented by our friends at Monticello Bank. Shout out Monticello Bank, NBCBank.com, proud presenting sponsors of 11 Personnel. Today we're going No Huddle with a big guy who's a big deal. He's the new Kentucky offensive line coach. He's been tasked to rebuild the Big Blue Wall. His name's Cutter Leftwich. Cutter, no relation to Byron, correct?
No relation. I get that a lot, but no, not that I know of.
Now, can you spin it? Can you throw it like Byron at all?
No, my brother was the quarterback, and I've always had my hand on the ground, and always been an offensive lineman my entire life. So never even scored a touchdown, So that didn't really get gifted with those abilities.
Well, we know you know your way around the trenches pretty well. I want to ask you about your brother, but
yeah.
I'm actually going to break protocol here first. In journalism school, they told us when you do these interviews, you don't start in with the hard-hitting questions, but I've been pressed by our friends at KS Board who got to know. This is a very important question. Drums or flats?
That's a great question. I am a drums guy myself.
Interesting.
I am. This might, I don't want to offend anybody or anything, but I think there's a little bit too much work there with some flats. So I kind of take the easy road, I guess, and just drench them. No matter what, I drench them in ranch. So
okay. See, and that's where I think I'm more of a flat guy because I figured out finally how to rip it apart, clean. And so that helped. And I only do the ranch maybe like one out of every three. Like I kind of want to feel the heat a little bit, kind of sweat a little, and then you cool off with the ranch.
Oh, no, I'm 100% ranch. 100%. Yeah, there's not a bite that goes by that's not going to be dipped in some ranch.
Well, I'm glad we got that very important journalism out of the way. That was I know I wore slacks. I was like, I'm going to ask them the tough questions. So I'm glad we got that one out of the way. But you grew up playing ball. Your dad coached all over the place. And you mentioned your brother, offensive coordinator at Texas Tech. You all were going to play against each other in a bowl game a year ago.
Yeah.
But missed that. Instead, you just played him in the college football playoff. So, I mean, was there a lot of chatter before the game at all?
Me and my older brother are extremely close. We normally talk, at least once a week, if not more. But to be completely honest, leading up to that game, there was very little chatter between us, very little talking. I talk, me and my dad talk almost, every single day. And, we still kept up with, us talking. And I know if there was one thing for sure, my mom was a nervous wreck going into that game.
But who got the dub, though?
Oh, yeah. Now, I'll tell you what, the family group chat after that one was buzzing, definitely in my favor there. But that was a really cool experience, to be honest with you, to be able to be in the college football playoff, being able to play in such a big game, but, being able to have your brother there, your family there, coaching against your brother, that was a really cool, unique experience. And I was definitely pretty excited, after that victory.
Yeah, and got the shutout. I guess that had to be pretty tough on him too, getting the old goose egg. I mean, just
that was pretty tough, but
but it's in the playoff. They won the Big 12. It was a good year. His quarterback was hurt half the year, so there's pieces to pick it up. I'm sure for you too. Like you didn't have a lot of time to chirp because there was a lot going on. The transfer portal was happening. I believe the next day you flew back with Stein. How nuts was that? Because I know a lot of people talked about what Will's done, but y'all got quite a few offensive linemen, and you're the offensive line coach. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, very little sleep. To be honest, it was you wanted to be able to put everything in to those games, to those playoff games, because those kids at Oregon, those guys in the offensive line room, that's what we worked for the entire season, to be in those games, to be in the college football playoffs. So I wanted to be able to give them everything I had, but also knew whenever it was over, we wanted to be able to be set up for success. Here at Kentucky. So a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of, late phone calls, and the time change, was tough. To be completely honest, that was something that, going back and forth and dealing with that was an issue I didn't even think was going to pop up, but being able to go back and forth there. But it was all, it was all worth it, and wouldn't trade it for the world. It was a good position. I tell people it was a good position to be in. There's much worse places or situations to be in. That's for sure.
You had a couple of badasses working for you on the law firm in the trenches there. Pregnon was, I don't know, he got 100 different awards. Mm-hmm. There's plenty more. Isaiah World, but those were transfer portal additions, and I'm not gonna lie, I do this thing sometimes, Cutter. It's kind of like Jeff Pecoro, the UK color analyst. When something really good happens, I just can't stop laughing. Yeah. And it was the day after you take a bad loss to Indiana, and there were some people around here who were very worried. They were like, "Are they going to get an offensive tackle? What's going to happen?" And then when I found out that Lance Hurd was going to be a Cat, I just couldn't stop laughing. I was just saying, I thought they did it. They effing did it. So how in the F did you do it, right?
Yeah. Great question. I think it really all started with the relationship that Coach Sloan and Lance created when they were at LSU together. Part of that recruitment and the time of him being there. I think it was also like when Lance left, the school he was at, I think there was some things he was really looking for. And the one thing about Lance, help you, be able to meet him and be able to talk to him more and more is like he's an extremely smart individual. He's very aware of his surroundings. He's very intentional. And so like he was looking for, a couple certain criterias and some things of, and I think, there was some, whether or not he's still going to go in the draft or not, there was still some options on his side of things. So I think whenever we sat down and we talked about, the situation here and what we were doing with the offensive line and my vision for the offensive line, Coach Sloan's vision for this offense, Coach Stein's vision for what this team is going to be like, I think it really fits everything that Lance was looking for. And I think, it was one of those things where, after we got done talking, we all smiled and it felt like, it was a really good talk and it was a really productive and it felt like we got everybody's questions answered. And then once we were, I was back in the office and I got a FaceTime from him and he said he was coming, man. I mean, I lit up and was running down the hallways and people were like, what's going on? And man, I was so excited, but I think it was a joint effort from everybody in this building to be able to get him because we know what type of player he is and what he's going to be for us here this upcoming season. So we're really excited about him and I'm really excited about a lot of the other guys here in our room.
I want to ask about maybe a couple of those individuals, but you mentioned just the vision you have. Yeah. I'm Kentucky fans have watched a lot of Inside Zone over the year. There's been some duo mixed in there as well. But like, what are you bringing to the table? What is that vision? Because it feels like Will Stein is a pretty malleable offensive coach who kind of wants to do a little bit of everything, just depending on circumstance.
Yeah, I think for us, we've evolved as an offense. I think we evolve every year. I think we get better as coaches every single year, and we continue to try to be able to learn and improve. And I think that's our jobs as coaches to be able to find out what we're really good at. Right, like if you go back and look at our couple offenses, the last couple of years we were at Oregon, and even the time I was at North Texas, and all the way back to when we were at UCLA, I've been around some really, really good offensive minds and been around some really good coaches, and it's really molded me to who I am today and the type of coach that I am. And I think learning from all those people and being able to put together an offense that we're all really proud of in the offensive staff room, but two, being able to fit the offense around what our players are really good at, right? So, like, I think that's our job is to find out this spring, over the summer and even fall camp, like find out what we are really good at, like what are some strengths to this offensive line, what are some strengths to what our quarterback, running backs, tight ends, receivers do. What do we do together as a unit that's really good? And then we continue to mold and morph this offense into what we're all really going to be happy to see as Kentucky fans and Kentucky football on Saturdays.
Tegra Shabola, he was another guy that made me cackle because they tried to get him here quite a bit. He played a lot at Ohio State. Colton Price played a ton at Baylor. How important is it when you're like to have guys who have that much experience against power conference competition?
Yeah, I think that's extremely important. I think, one thing when we're able to look at the portal and look at the people that were available, like one of the things that we looked at was experience, right? Like we lost 5 offensive linemen and all really good players. And there's really good players in this room still, but we felt like we needed to be able to continue to bring in experience. And that's what those, 3 guys do, including Lance and those guys you mentioned, Tegra and Colton, be able to bring in experience and been able to play football at an extremely high level. So I think it's, really good. It's always something you look for, and being able to have that experience and play in some really big games like Tegra's played in National Championship, played in some extremely, high level football and played in a good conference as well as Colton. So excited what they're able to bring for us here in the O-line room.
So you've been around experienced guys, but if I'm not mistaken, did you start 2 true freshmen at offensive tackle at North Texas?
Yeah, no, it was at center and at left tackle. So that's a funny story.
2 pretty important positions for an offensive line.
Yeah. So like it's I've never done that before, but I've always had the mindset of I will play the best 5 guys. Right. I don't care if you're a transfer, if you're, a freshman, if you're a redshirt freshman, been here for a couple years, like I'm always in the mindset of like the 5 best players will play. And so, we had some injuries. I think it was maybe the 12th or 13th play of the game versus South Alabama. Our, 6-year senior center went down and our backup center jumped in. It was a true freshman. And man, he played really, really hard and did a really good job. And then we had some other injuries throughout the year, and we just saw, another freshman that, continued to be able to improve and continue to be able to develop. And he found himself, in that starting lineup. And, both those guys did an extremely, extremely good job. But I think that's our job as a coach is to be able to get those guys ready, as soon as they walk in through the door. Like I said, like true freshmen, right? Redshirt seniors, right? You played a bunch of ball, you haven't played much. Like I think the 5 best guys will play. And we're going to continue to be able to look through that here at Kentucky throughout spring and fall.
Well, and, I mentioned some of the experienced guys, but you also have a lot of really promising players that, like, I'm not going to make your depth chart for you, but there's that offensive guard spot. There's a lot of interesting guys. The Allanen guy from Alabama who just, he's fascinating. He's a Finnish offensive lineman who was at Alabama. Like that's he's a fascinating guy. But also the kid from Tennessee, and there's plenty of returning talent back there. So how do you work your way through that when you're going through a competition? Because I know Coach Stein, he's been very adamant that, hey, we're going to compete here. So what does that look like when you're trying to rotate guys in and really see how the pieces fit together?
Yeah, I think offensive line wise, it's unique because it's 5 guys, coming together to be able to see the game, all in the same, vision, or all be able to see the game the same way. So like when you're playing next to a guy, like, what he's about to say, what call he's about to make before he even makes it. So I think being able to continue to be able to mix up the groups and I think one thing we do a really, really good job of is splitting our teams into, blue teams and white teams and be able to mix those guys. And like I don't have a depth chart. Like we mix guys throughout spring ball and fall camp because we want to be able to find what the best 5 rotation is. So I think that's going to take time, right? But I'll tell you what, I'm really excited from what we've been able to do so far. We have a really intelligent group. That's the guys that we've brought in, and that's the guys that are still here. And you can do some really fun things when you got a smart group.
I had a guy, Jake W. He had an interesting question because I'm fascinated by the answer too.
Yeah.
So like what when you're out recruiting or you're looking at portal players, what sort of tools do you look for in an offensive lineman that said, you know what, I don't know if I can teach that, but I can coach this guy to really maximize his potential?
Yeah, some like non-negotiables. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's some like weight. There's some things that you got to be able to. You got to be so big to be able to play in the SEC. Not everybody's going to play in the SEC. So there's a few things that there's some criteria, but there's also some things that you do extremely well that could be able to mask maybe something that you don't do as well or whatever that is. I think everybody's a little bit different. But I think really high character people, right, that are really physical, play with relentless effort, right, and ultimately like we're trying to be able to find out like, do you love football, right? Like, do you love the game of football? Really being able to get to know the recruits, really being able to get to know their families, their backstory, their history, right? Being able to really create a connection is extremely important to me, and it's not like everybody I recruit, or everybody that it's just not just you're not just another guy on the team. Right, like everybody to me is extremely important, and everybody has a role, and everybody is going to be able to be treated that way. And I really think if you love the game of football, you'll work your butt off every single day to be able to be at your very, very best. And so those are a couple of things we look at. I think like I said, if you love football, and I think that there's some flexibility and some natural things that people have to be able to have, right, to be able to play at this level. But when it comes down to it, like, do you love football? Like, do you love it, or do you just do it because you're good at it, or it's fun, or like, do you do it because you truly love the game?
Well, this kind of piggybacks off of that, but you've only been here like 2-3 months. Like, it hasn't been that long. You haven't gotten through a spring practice yet, but have you gotten a sense from Kentucky fans just how much they want to see the offensive line return to glory? I mean, it's not to diminish, what the unit last year was able to do, or even in some of the recent years, but the standard was Joe Moore Award semifinalist, finalist, and it hasn't been there. Can you sense that want to from the fan base?
No doubt. Ever since my first day here, right, being able to understand and more and more about the Big Blue Wall, and be able to understand the tradition and the history of some really, really good football players, have been through these walls and have been sitting in those offensive line meetings. And I understand that as a coach that, like I'm being held to a really high standard, right? And, I got to be able to hold our offensive linemen to a really high standard. And, that's our expectations, you know what I mean, is to be able to be Joe Moore Award winners, Joe Moore Award finalists, right? Being able to win the SEC championship, and ultimately being able to compete at the highest level, right? Like that's what, we think that we can be able to do here in Kentucky. We want to be able to do here, and be able to compete with the very, very best in the country, and, hold the offensive line to that standard. Cause I know it's been done here in the past. It's been done here, for multiple years. And so it's my job and our job to be able to continue that.
Well, I know folks are fired up to see you in action. The spring game is about 6-ish weeks away before we'll see you. Yeah. You've actually gotten a chance to work with Will Stein. We've only just seen him talk. Is he a fiery guy? Is he a rah-rah guy? Like, what is he like as a coach? Because sometimes when he's talking, he looks really chill, but then he like says something. He's like, damn it, we got to score some points. And you're like, oh, I didn't know you had that in you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've had the opportunity to be with Coach Stein, back in 21 at UTSA, and 23 at Oregon, and 25 at Oregon. So, I've, actually had the opportunity to live with Coach Stein for a little bit, in the movement and the transition. So, to answer your question, he's fiery, he's energetic, right? Like, when he gives his pregame speeches, and when he runs meetings, like there's guys that want to run through a brick wall for him. There's nothing he loves more than some scoring points, that's for sure. Of course, his family and all that, right? But like, he loves scoring points, and he's a tremendous mind, and is a really, really good football coach. But just beside that, one of the big reasons why I've been able to continue to be able to follow him and be with him is just he's an amazing person, right? Like, and he really cares for not only his players, but the coaches that he coaches with and their families, and like having us over for dinner, and being able to really create those connections, those bonds with the coaches as well as the players. Like, that's extremely important to me, like who I'm surrounding myself with. And he's somebody that is an unbelievable person right before you even get into the football like coaching aspect and side of things. But I know I got off topic there, but to answer your question, right, like guys gets fired up whenever they're going out there right before the pregame kickoff, and whenever he gives that pregame speech. I mean, he gets fired and he's energetic, and you can tell he really loves it.
Are you one of those who's like a chew them up, spit them out kind of guy, or? Because I feel like the old days, the offensive line coach, he was always the surliest of all the coaches.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I get fiery and energetic, and can get after it with the best of them. My dad coached college football for a while back in the day, so I've seen it done and seen some ass rippings with the best of them. So I think that there's a time and place for sure.
Well, we appreciate you giving us some time in this place. Yeah. It's exciting. The changes, it's all new for everybody. And I know folks are fired up to see what you're bringing to the Big Blue Wall this fall. And excited to see you out there. It's spring practice, spring game, April 18th. Did I get that
April
right?
18th, yeah, April 18th.
Oh, man. Well, Colonel Leftwich, appreciate you joining us today on 11 Personnel.
I appreciate you. Thank you for allowing me to come on, and extremely excited to be here.